So today we are going to continue on our bar graph from last week. So last week we already calculated our average, added our labels, our column headers, and a descriptive title. Now this week we're going to take it one step further and add some statistics. So just like on scatter plots, we use the R squared to determine how closely our data fits that trend line. For bar graphs, we use standard error, SE of your mean, to determine if there's a difference between our two bars. So in order to do that, we will use this equation right here. So standard error equals our standard deviation divided by our sample size. So the first thing I need to do is figure out what our sample size is. So sometimes for your categories, you'll have different numbers of samples per category. But for this, it makes it a little easier because we have the same sample in each of our categories. So our sample size for hours on Instagram is 8 because we sampled 8 students. So to calculate our square root, I'm going to start with my equal sign, type the Excel version of square root, start with my parenthesis, and then add my sample size, which is 8. So now I get 2.83, or the square root of 8. I'm going to do that one more time. You could just copy it over because it is the same value, but for demonstration, I'm going to show it again. So you start with your equal sign, do the square root version for Excel, SQRT, add a parenthesis, and your sample size. Next, I need to calculate standard deviation. So again, I'm going to start with my equal sign. Then I'm going to type STDEV. Add a parenthesis. And you can see I get the same instructions as I did for average. So I'm going to highlight these 8 numbers again. Be careful to only highlight these 8. Close out my parenthesis, and I get my standard deviation. There are some variations to this equation, like dot P is the most common one. So you can use that. Without the dot P, it is an older function, but it does relatively the same thing. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do my equal sign, STDEV. I'll add my dot P this time. Then I'll highlight the 8 numbers for hours on Facebook and close out my parenthesis. Now I have my 2 standard deviations for my 2 categories. But I'm not done yet because I need standard error for my error bars. So I'm going to use this equation. To start out, for my hours on Instagram, I'm going to add my equal sign as always. And then I need my standard deviation. So I'm going to click on that cell. Now it says B13 because that is where I am, B13, and that is my standard deviation for hours on Instagram. I'm going to use a slash or divide sign and then click on the square root of my sample size, or B12 in this case, and hit enter. And I get my calculated standard error for hours on Instagram. Next, I need to do this for hours on Facebook. So I'm going to start with my equal sign again, click on the standard deviation for hours on Facebook, use my backslash, and then click on the square root of my sample size. And now I have my 2 standard errors for my graph. So I'm going to go over to my analysis table and simply type those numbers into my table. So the standard error of the mean for hours on Instagram is 0.46. We'll just round off on that decimal to 2 decimal places. And then the standard error for hours on Facebook is 0.36, again, rounding off to those 2 decimal places. Now it's attached to my analysis table, but the last step is to actually get it onto my graph. So to do that, I'm going to click on my graph again, tab over to that familiar chart design, and then go to this add chart element again. And I have this error bar option. So it is really tempting to just click on standard error, but this gives you just a standard error. It doesn't give you your custom values that you calculated. So in order to get our custom values for our error bars instead of just a standard number, we go over to the error bars and select more error bar options. Now you can see I have this box that appeared on the side of my screen. To get back to it, I'm just going to right click on my error bar, click on format error bars, and I get this box to appear. I'm going to click on custom because I want to add my custom standard error here and then specify those values. So I get this little box that pops up. Now my positive error value and my negative error value are both the same thing. So I'm going to put the same numbers into this box. I'm going to delete everything that's in this cell already and then highlight the two numbers. I'm going to do that again for my negative error bar value. I'm going to delete what's in that cell and highlight my two numbers again. It's very important that you highlight both. When I do that, you can see I now have my custom error bars on my graph. They're two different sizes for my two different standard errors. So now my bar graph is complete. I have error bars, I have two column headers to label my columns, my y-axis label, and a descriptive title. So that is now how you complete a bar graph using Excel.